Sorry for all these delays. And good afternoon, everybody. And sorry to you for all these delays. My name is Andrew Suderman. I'm the Secretary of the Peace Commission. Are you going to turn that down? Okay. I'm the Secretary of the Peace Commission for Mennonite World Conference. And today, one of the ideas was for us to share a little bit about one of our policies that came into effect in 2015, or that we drafted and was approved in 2015. And this was with regards to Mennonite World Conference's policy with regards to political advocacy. When is it that we get involved in political struggles? When is it that we get involved in certain situations around the world? That ultimately was one of the question marks, because we have received over the years many invitations to be involved, to get involved, to lend our voice to the struggles, that people around the world might have. And so this policy was an attempt at trying to explain when is it that we get involved, how is it that we get involved, et cetera. And so today I just want to run through some of the kind of the background to that policy, how it came about, what are some of the things that we're trying to enact, or what are some of the things that we're trying to kind of identify in terms of why we want to get involved, or when do we get involved, and then explain or share a little bit about some of the ways in which we have in the past. So if you have your Bibles, first of all, I don't know, did anybody bring their Bibles? All right, nobody in the room has brought their Bibles. Anybody online, do you have your Bible? Yes, there we go. All right, Hito, can I ask you to read? I'm going to put you on the spot if that's all right. Can I ask you to read Philippians chapter 1, verse 27?
Okay. Philippians. Moment. Philippians. Okay. Is it chapter 1?
Philippians chapter 1, verse 27.
Verses again, please. 20. Verses 21.
27.
27. Okay.
Okay. Go ahead. Philippians chapter 1, 27.
All right. Most important, live together in a manner worthy of Christ's gospel. Do this whether I come and see you or I'm absent and hear about you. Do this so that you stand firm, united in one spirit and mind, as you struggle together to remain faithful to the gospel.
Wonderful. Can you read those first words again? I'm curious about what your version says.
Yeah, I'm reading a Common English Bible.
Oh, perfect.
And it says, most important, live together in a manner worthy of Christ's gospel.
Live together in a manner worthy of Christ's gospel. Very interesting. Okay. Peter, can I put you on the spot? It looked like you were following along. Am I right or no?
Yes, I'm following. Yes.
All right. Can I ask you to read Philippians 1:27? Do you have a different version?
Well, I have it in Dutch here.
Okay. What does the Dutch say? I'm curious.
Well, it's similar to the English. I can read it in Dutch if you like to.
Sure.
Oké, hier gaat het om. Blijf leven in overeenstemming met het evangelie van Christus, zodat ik kan zien als ik bij u kom, of als ik niet kom over u kan horen, dat u één van geest bent en eensgezind strijdt voor het geloof in het evangelie. So, if you understand a little bit German, you may understand a little bit of this.
What's the first couple of words? How would you translate that?
Well, this is the point where it is about. Remain living in agreement with the gospel of Christ.
Aha. Remain living in the gospel of Christ. Very interesting. Martina, did I see you following along too?
Yes, I follow. And it's the same, like Peter said, like he translated from Dutch in English in my version.
It's the
in
same.
My German version. Yes.
Okay, what do you have?
I have the NIV.
Okay, NIV here. Go ahead.
Okay. Whatever happens, conduct yourselves in a manner worthy of the gospel of Christ.
Conduct yourselves.
Yeah.
That's interesting. No, that's fine. That's interesting. Conduct yourselves. Well, if we had the screen up, I'd be able to show you that the word here that's being translated, we heard one word, for example, that it was live your life. Some translations have live your life according to. Your version had conduct yourself, right? This word that's being translated is the word politomai, right? Which is, I think, one of the first or one of the only places in the Greek scriptures where this word, the verb for politics, is used. Politomai. This is the verb for politics, right? And this is one of the only places, I think perhaps the only place in the New Testament where this is actually used. And so here Philippians is articulating kind of a vision, saying, you know, the way in which you conduct yourselves, the way in which you live your life, or the way in which you politic, right? Do that in a manner that's worthy of the gospel of Christ. Let your politics let your politicking be in a manner that's worthy of the gospel of Christ, right? And so ultimately, if we look at the root word of politics itself, right? If we look at the root word of politics, we get to this notion, this understanding that highlights that politics is the way in which we relate to one another. Okay? Oftentimes, and here I'm assuming, if I'm assuming incorrectly, I'm glad that I'm incorrect, but I'm assuming that oftentimes when we think of politics, we think of what nation states do, right? Or what politicians do in making sure that the nation state will operate or conduct itself or will, right? We often talk about politics as that which happens through the lens of the nation state. That's often the way in which we understand politics. Am I right or wrong? Yeah, often, right? Well, here we have this interesting place that it seems like it's offering an alternative political vision. That actually there are other forms, right? There's other ways in which we conduct ourselves. And when we explore and look at the way in which we relate to each other, that ultimately is a political question. It's ultimately focusing on what kind of politics are we embodying? And it doesn't necessarily have to be through the nation state, right? And so Philippians 1:27, I think, kind of is suggesting, and I think that the MWC policy that we've drafted, that we wrote, that was approved, tries to highlight the way in which Philippians 1:27 articulates this idea that the ways in which we behave in society, we want to do that as ambassadors of Christ's gospel, right? And so this is what nourishes and shapes our political vision. And that may very well be it might very well be a different political vision than that of the nation state, right? We also wanted to look at the notion of advocacy. What does advocacy mean, right? And so in John 14, verse 16, for example, we have in this beautiful upper room discourse that takes place in the Gospel of John between chapters 14 to 17. We have this, and in these chapters, there's a fascinating, okay, so I'm a theologian, I think it's fascinating. Maybe other people don't, but there's a fascinating discourse that explores the nature and understanding of truth. What is truth? Who embodies or who identifies this notion of truth, right? And so we have, for example, Jesus saying, I am the truth. I am the, right? You have that whole saying. Well, just a few sentences or a few verses later, we have John saying that Jesus, this is John saying what Jesus is saying, that I will ask the Father and he will give you another advocate to be with you forever, right? And later on, he actually articulates that this advocate is the Spirit of truth. So once again, there's this kind of playing out as to what truth means, what truth looks like, who's participating in truth, right? Later on in chapter 17, there's also in Jesus's prayer, there's also this notion of God, your word is truth, right? You are the truth. And then there's this invitation for the people, for you, for Christ's followers to participate in us. This is Jesus praying to God, that the followers of Jesus can participate in us in this truth, right? So this whole thing around that kind of revolves around truth, which is really quite interesting. But ultimately in John 14, verse 16, here we have Jesus promising this advocate, right? And in 1 John chapter 2, verse 1, the author of John says, and if anyone sins, we have an advocate with the Father, and that is Jesus Christ the righteous. So Jesus also acts as an advocate. So Christ's followers in John are promised this advocate, which is later described as the Holy Spirit, right? Who serves as an advocate for us. And then in 1 John, we see this other notion of advocate, who is Jesus Christ himself, right? And so with these different, and of course in the New Testament, the Greek word for advocate or advocacy is this parakletos, right? Para meaning, sorry, that's my Spanish coming out, but somebody might say para or whatever. I say para. There's para meaning alongside or together with. And kletos is to be called from the verb kaleo, right? So ultimately, this idea of advocacy is the one who is called to walk alongside. The one who is called to walk alongside. And it's also, I think, kind of interesting that this notion of kletos there's also kind of a play in words, because that's also used. If I have a whiteboard, I do have a, I do, right? Because there's also this play on this notion of ecclesia, right? Kletos comes from that, it's coming from the same root word as ecclesia, which literally means the church. This is what's translated as the church. Ecclesia is the church, right? And it's those who are called out, those who have a vocation and are called out, right? And so this notion of parakletos, this notion of advocacy, right? We could understand it as one who is called out to walk alongside.
Andrew, may I interrupt, or is it disturbing?
No, go ahead.
Okay. This word is also related to what in German and in Dutch is the word Ermahnung. Mm-hmm. We call our churches, maybe Martino, you're speaking German, aren't you? Ermahnung.
Yes, I do.
Ermahnung.
Ermahnung.
Yeah, that's the same word. That's the same root as where Andrew is talking about also. We call our churches in the Netherlands Ermahnungen.
Uh-huh.
Places of Ermahnung, parakaleo.
Places of advocacy.
Yes. That is actually the related to the Greek word.
Interesting.
And it is also, to encourage each other. Mennonite churches in the Netherlands are places to encourage each other and to comfort each other. Yep. Okay, that is just a side remark. Okay.
Yeah, very interesting. Very good. Thank you very much for that.
Okay.
And so ultimately, what we wanted to do as Mennonite World Conference, what we wanted to highlight was that to be political and to be an advocate, or to participate in advocacy, are both integral to being the church, right? And I think this is what Peter, is that right? Is that your name, Peter? Yeah. Okay. I mean, that's what I hear Peter suggesting, right? Like there's this element of to be an advocate is an essential element of what it means to be the church, right? And likewise, to be political, frankly, is an essential element of what it means to be the church as well.
I can fully agree with that. Yes, thank you. Yeah.
And now, I mean, here we always have to challenge that we don't fall down the slippery slope of simply assuming that to be understood as political is to be understood as the nation state, right? There are other forms of politics, and that's what we're trying to get at, right? So with that said, right, I mean, there are some who, for example, have this.
Sorry, Andrew. Sorry,
Yes.
Andrew. May I tell something about this, because I think that's very, very important. Also in Germany, the difference between advocacy and lobbyism. We are not. We are as a church. We are not a thing like an association of I don't know who.
Yeah.
We have to make a difference between advocacy and lobbyism.
In other words, lobbyism is lobbying the government.
For example, lobbying my own association. So I'm not that's not our task to tell everybody how wonderful we are as Mennonites or something like this. We have to do advocacy.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. So and so ultimately, you know, these are the things that we wanted to highlight, that there are ways in which the church is integrally, you know, connected to politics, a certain form of politics, and advocacy, right? Now, within the Christian tradition, in this document, one of the things that we wanted to highlight was that within this Christian tradition, there are different forms of advocacy that has come into light, right? One of them is prophetic advocacy, right? Well, here, let me take a step back here. The Christian tradition has often depicted Jesus in 4 different ways. There might be more, but we kind of focused on 4. Prophet, priest, king, and sage. Prophet, priest, king, and sage, right? And so therefore, there's a connection, obviously, between Jesus and the church. And so therefore, the church may also find ways to be prophet, priest, king, and sage, right?
What's the last one?
Sage. Right? The wise people, right? And so in attempting to articulate what that means or what that might look like, we tried to explain prophetic advocacy might refer to the denouncing of wrongs and injustices, right? So prophetic advocacy might or can refer to denouncing wrongs and injustices. And so as such, it's not neutral. Right? Prophetic advocacy is not neutral. It takes sides, and it takes the side of justice over injustice. Right? Kingly advocacy, we might say, refers to seeking systematic and structural changes. And this may require a longer-term commitment for change. That's what we would describe as, or that's what we tried to kind of explained through this notion of kingly advocacy. Sagely advocacy might refer to what we might describe as quote unquote quiet diplomacy, right? This may mean an ongoing ministry to speaking the truth to places of decision making and policy making. And then priestly advocacy can refer to, you know, perhaps accompaniment, right? Or we might describe this as incarnational work. Right? Being with the people. Now, each one of these forms of advocacy are important, right? And as such, we can also identify ways in which MWC has already been participating, has already been embodying a form of advocacy, right? In different ways. For example, we have had an internship at the United Nations headquarters in New York City through MCC, right? We have participated and continue to participate in different ecumenical dialogues, for example, and have participated and have added our weight to different statements that have emerged, right? So for example, the World Council of Churches and their journey with regards to a just peace, right? And so here, I mean, you can hear more about that through Fernando Enz and Andres Pacheco Lozano, who are here, and they'll also be offering a workshop focused on that, right? We've also provided our name, or we've also signed on and have pushed for statements, interfaith statements regarding, for example, the prohibition of nuclear weapons, and so on and so forth, right? We've joined and participated in other ecumenical dialogues that have advocated for solidarity, right? And so we've participated in advocacy for standing with children on the move, looking at the realities of the harms that often happen specifically to children, amongst others, right? Through the realities of forced immigration and migration, right? And of course, I mean, I don't think that we can underplay the impact that these Mennonite World Conference assemblies themselves have in terms of initiating conversations and imaginations that ultimately lead toward different forms of advocacy. I think one of the most significant ones, perhaps, that we can highlight, right, was in, I think, in 1983, in response to Ron Sider's challenge to Mennonite World Conference Assembly. Christian peacemaker teams, now community peacemaker teams, was born from that, right? And that happened during an MWC Assembly event, right? And so these moments of being together, of talking to one another, can be opportunities, and are opportunities that ultimately have emerged in order to embody some form of advocacy. And so we have been involved in different forms of advocacy, right? Sometimes to kind of narrow in on the kind of the prophetic advocacy, the prophetic understanding of advocacy, that takes sometimes some more, because oftentimes they're more urgent, they're more immediate, right? The needs are required, like they're happening now. We need to participate in now. We need to do something now. And so, but sometimes when we do that, we don't have the opportunity to go through kind of the typical decision-making process that we typically would as Mennonite World Conference Assembly. And so these forums, these opportunities to participate in prophetic advocacy, right? They sometimes generate more public interest and reaction. We don't always have the same time to consult. And so sometimes we kind of, we forge ahead knowing that, perhaps not everybody within our communion might agree with the stance or with the comment that we're making, right? And so ultimately this has raised questions like, does MWC leadership have the authority to speak on behalf of all of our member churches around the world? When do we do that? Do we do that? And so we think very carefully and long about when do we get involved in that. But there are times when we do. And this is one of the reasons why we wanted to craft this particular policy, so that we had some guiding posts and some guideposts along the way to tell us when is it that we should get involved? What questions should we ask in order to determine and discern when we should get involved, et cetera. And so there are ways in which MWC has already and has for a long time been participating in some form of political advocacy through these different ways, through these different lenses, right? One of the things that we have done, just to kind of give you a little bit of an example over the last couple of years, and here I wish that I would be able to give you some or show you some pictures, but here we have, I'm going to try to do that actually. I'm going to share my screen. I'm going to share my screen here. All right, can you see that? All right. There we go. So in 2014, and we will be sharing more about this there's a 3-part series on the Declaration of Solidarity with Indigenous Peoples that we'll be presenting starting tomorrow and in the next couple of days. That document was approved in 2018 in Kenya. that was an example of a response that so in 2014, we were asked by the Wunan people, which is an indigenous tribe in Panama, to as to whether or not we would be able to help with their particular struggle that they were facing and that they were experiencing in Panama. They had large swaths of kind of recognized indigenous land that was recognized by the government as indigenous and as theirs. But people, what they would describe as los colonistas, the colonizers would come in and would take liberties with their land, right? And take their land. And they'd also chop down, for example, cocobolo trees, which are these very what's the word? Valuable trees that have this like rich cherry. It's almost like a cherry wood, right? And they would use this very, very sparingly in order to create beautiful things. But they would do that sparingly, knowing that they would have to plant another one. And they were very concerned about how they would use their resources and whatnot. Well, los colonistas didn't. They didn't care about that. And they would just come in and knock down all these trees and take them, right? And so they were asking whether we would be able to help in some way. And so in 2014 and then in 2015, we sent what we would describe as a solidarity delegation or a solidarity visit. And so members from the Peace Commission and members from the Deacons Commission went to go and learn more and to hear what's happening and to hear their story and hear their perspective and try to understand better. And so here we have, for example, Joji, who is right in the middle here, Joji Pantoja. She's from the Philippines, and she's a Mennonite Church Canada worker in the Philippines. She has been the chair of the Peace Commission for the last 7 years. So she went along with the previous secretary of the Peace Commission, Jack Suderman, along with Hank Stenvers, who was the secretary for the Deacons Commission. Now he's the president-elect for Mennonite World Conference, and another member from the Deacons Commission. They went to go and visit the Wunan people to understand and to hear their story and what's going on. And to also ask the question, what can we do? What is it that you would like us to do? Yes?
How did they contact you? How did the indigenous people in Panama contact MWC?
Well, the question emerged in the room. How did they contact us? How did the Wunan people contact us? The Wunan people, a significant majority of the Wunan people are members of an MB church, a Mennonite Brethren church in Panama. And that church is a member church of Mennonite World Conference. And so that church contacted us and it's difficult to say contacted us because they're part of Mennonite World Conference. So they also contacted themselves. Right, but they contacted the main offices of Mennonite World Conference to ask, is there something that can be done? Is there something that MWC and in particular the Peace Commission would be able to do to support their particular struggle? And so we went and we visited, we listened, and out of that, and I'll share more about this tomorrow, but out of that, they helped us craft a prayer that we would share with our global communion for them. How can we pray for them? Here's one way. And so they helped us craft this prayer. They helped us, they suggested that a letter writing campaign could be done. They asked for a letter from Mennonite World Conference to the Panamanian government, highlighting this struggle, highlighting this concern. And they also asked for a statement that Mennonite World Conference could have with regards to indigenous peoples that they could then use for their political or for their legal challenges, right? So they could use and they could point to the statement saying, we are a part of this body and this is what this body believes in. And so they have a statement that they would be able to use, right? And so that happened in 2014 and 2015. In 2018, we received, there was some significant tensions between, for example, Hong Kong and China, right? And there still are. And we received a request from the churches in Hong Kong for us to, for some kind of a delegation visit, so some kind of a visit of solidarity. And so once again, we had members from the Peace Commission, members from the Deacons Commission go to Hong Kong to visit the churches to see and understand what's happening within that context. Yeah.
Maybe coming to what would happen with that situation if we would not be and the elections.
Well, that you have to come in. Yeah, there's a 3-part series coming up the rest of this week, and you have to sit in that one. That's the catch, right? So is it, what time does this end? 3:30?
Yeah.
So we are, oh, 3 o'clock? Oh, jeepers. Are we? No, we're not there yet.
No, you 45 minutes.
Okay, my computer is still in North American time, so it's okay. So we still got time.
Andrew,
Yes.
Just a small advice to repeat the questions because of the sound. Okay?
Yeah, thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Now, so in 2018 and 2019, we paid some visits to the churches in Hong Kong in order to understand what was happening within those contexts as well. And so these are some of the ways in which we have tried to walk with, right? To embody that advocacy notion of being called to come alongside. Fernando Enz has a beautiful way of reframing that, and he said this again at the Global Anabaptist Peace Network meetings, where they're changing the language that they're using from accompaniment, which still has kind of this power differential kind of notion, to companionship, finding ways of being in companionship with each other, right? Side by side, right? But ultimately, right, this is what we're trying to find, ways in which we can support, come alongside, be side by side, be companions, in the journey and on the journey. So these are the things that we're trying to do, and we're trying to kind of wrestle with in terms of how we do that. And there have been many different ways in which we have worked at this. There have been other churches, for example, our churches in Colombia, with regards to the ongoing civil war that's been taking place there, the search for peace, the peace accords that have emerged, the ongoing need, the ongoing desire to recognize conscientious objectors in the Colombian context. And so in that sense, we've participated in letter writing campaigns to the government of Colombia, to different ministers, where all of a sudden they're receiving a lot of letters from a lot of different people from around the world going, "What? This is interesting. Why am I getting all of these things from Germany, from Angola, from South Africa, from where have you?" Right? We've done the same in South Korea. We've done different forms of letter writing campaigns. We've participated with Amnesty International as they continue to work and advocate in South Korea for the recognition of conscientious objectors in South Korea as well. That situation is shifting a little bit. It's not shifting as much as folks there would like, but it is beginning to shift. Up until now, in South Korea, you were not allowed to be a conscientious objector, and so if you did not serve in the military for, I believe, 2 years, then you would go into prison. You would be imprisoned for 18 months, and you would have a record, right, a legal record, which then wouldn't allow you to be able to work in certain sectors and so on and so forth. And you would have fines that you would have to pay afterwards. And if you didn't pay that, those fines would increase. And so it's very rough. Amnesty International has been very active. We've participated in letter writing campaigns to the government of South Korea as well, and to their courts as they were rethinking this whole process of conscientious objection. They do now, in fact, recognize conscientious objection. However, at this point in time, from what I understand, and this again might be shifting, but at this point in time, from what I understand, if you either serve in the military, or if you do not, and if you're a conscientious objector, then you can serve as not a prisoner, but you can serve as a guard within a prison for 36 months. So instead of being imprisoned for 18 months, you're working in a prison for 36 months.
That's quite cynical, isn't it?
It is. I think it is. And so that's why I'm saying it's shifting a little bit. I'm not sure that I would say that it's getting better. And so there's still some push saying how we view conscientious objection, or what the opportunities for conscientious objection, the way in which we imagine that we need to continue to work on what that might look like within the South Korean context. In 2000 and I don't remember I want to say 16, but I might be wrong. There was one Mennonite who was imprisoned for being a conscientious objector, and we participated in a letter writing campaign where
our church too in the Netherlands. We corresponded with him also.
Yes, we asked churches around the world to send letters to him in prison as a form of support and as a form of recognizing him and his struggle and whatnot. And his reaction, I mean, the stuff that he has said, I mean, he's been very supportive, or he said those receiving those letters were very supportive, were very, they made his day. And again, it also raised questions, significant questions for those who worked in the prisons, going, why is this person receiving all of these different letters from all around the world? And it raises questions for them. So these are the different forms in which we have been participating in political advocacy. We're always open to participating, to helping our member churches in some of the struggles that they're involved in. One thing that is just very clear, and this is where I'm going to end, and I'm going to open it up for discussion and questions and what have you. But one thing that, and this is one of the policies that we have, recognizing the polity of Mennonite World Conference, is that we can't act and we won't act without an invitation to act. In other words, if there is someone who, or if there's a country, or if there's a church that would want us to get involved, we first need to be invited, and we need a request to be able to have that conversation to what that looks like. We're not going to step into a situation that we don't know. We're not going to step into a situation that we're not familiar with in order to say, this is what happens when we don't. Because sometimes we also get some questions about, why haven't we gotten involved in other places and other struggles? And frankly, the main reason is because we haven't been asked to. So a request is always a necessity for us. And with that request, then we are able to have that conversation as to what involvement looks like. And what might we be able to play as a global communion in supporting the different struggles around the world. I'll end there and open it up for conversation and for questions. Yes. Yeah. You want, the question is it a question or is it a comment? You said. with regards to the Declaration of Solidarity with Indigenous Peoples. Okay, so the question is, there's a request to have more of a teaser as to what the next couple of slots for the workshops that focus on the Declaration of Solidarity with Indigenous People, what that might look like.
I'm part of the Walking the Path in Saskatchewan.
Oh yeah.
And so this is
very good.
This is my life.
Yeah.
I also spent 5 years teaching up in the farm.
Yeah.
In this community, so I have a great passion for those folks. And, I mean, in our little corner,
yeah,
we're fighting with a government that wants to give away our crown land that is traditional hunting territory.
All right. So the comment was that we have somebody in the room who comes from Saskatchewan, Canada, and has and is working currently. What is it called again?
Walking the path.
Walking the path to reconciliation, and so exploring and kind of wrestling with what does that look like in the Canadian context. Right. Yeah. Yeah. So this coming week there are 3 slots that focuses on the Declaration of Solidarity with Indigenous Peoples. So this is a MWC document that was approved in 2018 in Kenya. And so the General Council approved this document unanimously. And I can say more about that, but I'll leave that as a. And so the first workshop, so this will be tomorrow, we'll look at the document itself and how the document emerged. So I'll say more about the Wunan people, the struggle, and I'll share more. Hopefully this will work and I'll be able to share more pictures about that. The second workshop will focus more on different Indigenous struggles and stories of Indigenous struggles around the world. And so we will have Katarina Friesen from the United States share about the work of the DDoD, the Dismantling the Doctrine of Discovery coalition that's working in the U.S. in close proximity with the church, as to what dismantling that doctrine looks like and how they're working at that within the U.S. context, which I think has significant implications for the Canadian context. I don't know. See, this is wonderful, but it's wonderful that there are many who are sharing these stories, and that's good. We also have so Joji Pantoja, the chair of the Peace Commission, along with a friend of hers and a coworker of theirs in Peace Builders community in the Philippines, how they've been working at the kind of Indigenous struggles in the Philippines. And then we'll have Wendy Craker from CMU, from Canadian Mennonite University, who will be sharing about the Canadian context as well. So those 3 will happen in the second workshop. And then the third workshop of that series will be, now, given this, what are kind of wrestling with questions about what are the realities in terms of our relationship to Indigenous peoples in whatever place we are in, right? And so if we're in Canada, what does that look like? If we're in, where are you from? In Germany. If you're in Germany, what does that look like in the German context, right? If you're in Canada, okay, same thing. Right? If you're in Panama, if you are an Indigenous tribe that is a member church of Mennonite World Conference, what does that look like for you? Because that's a whole different reality, right? And as we were writing this document, I think that one of the things that was the most fascinating and it was the most interesting was looking at and listening to, I mean, frankly, it was stepping out of kind of the Eurocentric or the North Atlantic centric way of viewing and understanding our walk with Indigenous peoples, recognizing that there are Indigenous peoples that are part of our communion. So that created a whole different dynamic in writing a document that was for Mennonite World Conference, right? So those are the 3 kind of workshops that we're going to be focusing on. And the third one is how do we embody, how do we live into this document? And what does that look like in your context? Yeah. Other questions, comments? What are advocacy needs in your country, in your with regards to your church? We already heard one, but maybe there's more. What's that? Yes. Those of you online, what does that look like? Are there advocacy needs in your particular context? And are there ways in which a global communion might be able to support such advocacy?
Well, I think from our Dutch context at this moment, the issues of climate and environment, many refugees that have come from Ukraine to our country, but also from other countries, from the Arabic countries that have come here. Well, that needs a lot of attention because in our country, there are a lot of problems in, finding the right places, enough places for those people in need. And see, what we as local churches can do is that we offer our support to the organizations in our communities,
Mm-hmm.
And local churches maybe offer, I know some Mennonite churches in our country that offer Dutch language courses to Ukrainian people at this moment, because the children that have come here, they join the elementary schools. They go, that's one of the things they organize in our country immediately, that children will go to school. So they have to integrate also with our Dutch systems in education.
Mm-hmm.
So that is more a national thing, of course, but it connects to your story, of course.
Mm-hmm.
And I can say that not only the Mennonites, but also the other churches in our country are very much involved with voluntary work. In helping out this terrible situation for those people.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Very good, thank you.
Yes, another huge problem is the militarization of Europe, of the European Union, and especially the remilitarization of Germany. They changed a law in order to have money to buy arms and weapons, and I think it's very important to be there and make advocacy in different forms.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And in that situation, for example, I mean, is there, might a statement or a word or whatnot from a global communion such as Mennonite World Conference help or support in that particular reality that we're facing, and that our brothers
yes,
and sisters.
Sure. I'm sure that might be help. We had made a statement from the German Association of Mennonite congregations, and many people from other churches asked us to make this statement in order that they see that their churches say, for example, pacifism now is is over. That's something for peace times, but not for war times. And for this thing, yes, I think that will be very, very important. Might be very, very important for the European Mennonites, because not only for the European Mennonites, because then in the NATO there also are the other countries from outside Europe, especially US. Yes, I think it might be very important.
Yeah. Well, if you think that would be one way in which we can help, then you can agitate the Mennonite churches in Germany to initiate a conversation.
I will.
And we would welcome that. I would welcome that. And also for interest's sake, there's another document that we were asked to create, much like the Declaration of Solidarity with Indigenous Peoples, but from and with regards to other struggles, in particular from Colombia, as well as from South Korea. And it's a document that focuses on conscientious objection. So a statement with regards to conscientious objection. What does that mean? What does that look like? And why do we uphold, whatever word we want to use, right? That was going to go for conversation within the General Council this past week. But given some of the situations this week around cases, for those of you online, maybe you don't know, we've had kind of some cases that has kind of curtailed some of our meetings. So we haven't had a lot of the discussions that we thought and hoped and decision-making that we thought and hoped that we would have. But that statement is still in front of the General Council for approval and for adoption, for that it might be adopted as an MWC statement. So I think that's another kind of speaking and thinking about Martina's comment. I think that's another kind of resource that is in the works that hopefully might be able to be of use for churches. Again, this is one of those that came out of a request from South Korea in particular, saying if we had a document like this that we would be able to kind of point to as we struggled and as we push for conscience objection, we can show our own government saying, you know, this is the body that I belong to. This is what we believe. This is why we believe it. And so it lends a little bit of support from kind of our worldwide communion for particular struggles in and around the world, right? So in this particular case, South Korea, and in Colombia as well, they've requested this as well. And there are so many other countries that still have military conscription, right?
I wanted to acknowledge the people that talk in the chat. So I'm going to bring the chat in the whole group so everybody here can see it. There's a number of people that left messages on the chat. Some of the people on here are actually in quarantine in South Korea, and so they're able to join through Zoom, which is something that is real handy if you can't get a meeting. Okay, and Martina and Deb is here also in South Korea. Hero, Sakura, Name Gerber from Switzerland. Jeff is sending a message to Wanda and Joe. Good morning, greetings to all of you from here in the Netherlands, in the province of Friesland, province of Simons.
That's where my dad's from.
That's right.
They were joining, yeah, okay. So people didn't want to speak. And then there's Jerusalem Ketema from Ethiopia. So you don't see your picture, probably because your video won't take the bandwidth, but thank you for joining us.
Mm-hmm.
Could you give a resume of what is said? We couldn't hear.
He was just going through the different chat messages that have that were also there, just so that the folks in this room could see the different messages that were coming through chat. So
Okay. How many people are there with you in the room?
we have five others.
Okay, and where are they from?
We have, sure. Here, I'm gonna do a little tour. I'm gonna do a little tour.
Hi, I'm Natasha from Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada.
Hi.
Nicholas from Germany. Hello, Martina.
Hi.
Hi, I'm John Woolard from Edmonton, Alberta, Canada.
Hi.
I'm Nancy Up. I'm from Saskatchewan in Canada, and I am a Sweerstress. So Peter Post, my heritage is Frisian.
Oh, wonderful. You speak Frisian? You still speak Frisian?
No.
Oh.
And this is Steve Graham. I'm the host of the meeting.
Okay.
Thank you. Thanks.
There we go. And I am Andrew, and I originally come from Canada, by the way. So even though I live in the States now, and I went to CMU. So I went to CMU in Winnipeg, Manitoba, and we then lived in Ontario as well. But I was born in Saskatchewan. So I was born in Rosser.
Oh, you love Rosser.
Yeah. There you go. So there you go. So good. Well, any other? I don't get the sense that there are other questions or comments. So I don't think that we need to keep you for an agonizing another 20 minutes if you don't if you don't want to. Thank you very much for being here. And again, if there are ways in which we might be able to help walk, accompany, be in companionship with others in advocacy and in order to embody a new form of or a different form of politics in the world, please don't hesitate to contact us. And we will love to have a conversation as to what that looks like and how we might be able to struggle and work and walk together. So thank you very much. Thanks everybody online.